The elite halls of Fairmont Academy fell deathly quiet when Mrs. Fitzgerald delivered her brutal words. "Pack your things. Farm girls don't belong in my advanced biology class." As giggles echoed through the room, Madison Wilson stood frozen, clutching her flawless test results to her chest. What none of them knew was that the rusty old truck waiting to take her back to Greenfield Farm carried more than just a girl in tears. It carried a secret that would soon flip their entire world upside down. The next morning, Principal Harrison spilled coffee all over his custom-tailored Italian suit as the windows of his office trembled from the roar of helicopter blades. He looked up, horrified, just in time to see a sleek black chopper, marked with the world-renowned wolf and dove logo of the Wilson Animal Therapy Foundation, descend onto Fairmont's pristine athletic field. Out stepped a woman in a flawless suit, Dr. Victoria Wilson, Nobel Prize winner, global icon in medical innovation, and Madison's mother. She walked straight toward his office, eyes locked, ready to shake the very foundation of everything he thought he knew about belonging. "Before we go further, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story already has your heart racing, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's episode, it's next level." Back to Fairmont, a place that loomed with centuries of prestige. Its red brick facade and perfectly trimmed lawns told a story of wealth, legacy, and privilege. Behind its iron gates stood a school that shaped senators, CEOs, and titans of industry. And Principal Robert Harrison, 57, made sure everyone remembered that. With his polished shoes, stern demeanor, and signature red and blue striped tie, Harrison had run the place with an iron grip for 15 years, handpicking families he deemed worthy of the Fairmont name. That morning, sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of his wood-paneled office. Photos of Harrison posing with alumni who now ruled industries lined the walls, alongside certificates and an oil portrait of the school's founder, Edmund Fairmont. At exactly 9:30, a knock broke the silence. "The Wilsons are here, sir," his assistant said, unsure. "Send them in," he replied with a tight smile, then muttered, "and maybe have maintenance on standby. I suspect there might be mud." In walked Howard Wilson, a tall, sun-worn man whose clean shirt and pressed pants couldn't hide the marks of hard work. Calloused hands, awkward posture, and luxury. Beside him, 16-year-old Madison, poised, quiet, sharp-eyed, dressed in a simple blue dress, not from any boutique Fairmont moms would recognize. "Good morning," Harrison said, still seated behind his enormous mahogany desk, gesturing to the expensive leather chairs. "Thank you for meeting with us," Howard said humbly, sitting down with care. "Yes, well," the principal interrupted, already flipping through Madison's folder, even though he'd read it days ago and made up his mind. Madison hugged a worn portfolio of academic awards to her chest, silent but alert, noting every glance, every smirk, every detail of the room. "Miss Wilson," he finally said, looking up with veiled condescension, "while your academic record is acceptable, Fairmont holds itself to standards that go beyond just test scores." He stressed the word just, like straight A's, and perfect scores were barely worth his time. Howard straightened up. "Sir, my daughter's been top of her class for 3 years. She won the state environmental science fair. She's been taking AP and college-level courses since she was 13. Principal Harrison narrowed his eyes, and the story was only just getting started. As Mr. Wilson's boots stepped across the antique Persian rug in Principal Harrison's office. A faint speck of dried farm mud fell from the sole, barely visible, yet enough to make Harrison's jaw tighten. Though the boots were clean, they still carried the silent proof of a life spent working the land, something that clearly didn't belong in a place like this, at least in the principal's eyes. "Yes, I'm sure she excelled at her country school," Harrison said, waving dismissively at Madison's spotless academic record. "But here at Fairmont, our students are prepared for a far more sophisticated environment, one that demands a certain Polish. Our graduates go on to Ivy League institutions and global leadership roles. We have a reputation to uphold." Madison sat motionless, her hands trembling slightly in her lap, but her back remained straight. She didn't interrupt. Not yet. "And then there's tuition," Harrison added, adjusting his cufflinks with a practiced flourish. I understand you've applied for financial assistance, but our scholarships are extremely limited, reserved for candidates with unique circumstances or long-standing ties to our donor network. His meaning was crystal clear. Farmers need not apply. Howard Wilson's face flushed. With respect, sir, we're not asking for a handout. My daughter earned this opportunity, and we're prepared to make sacrifices for her education. Harrison leaned forward, folding his hands like a judge preparing a verdict. Mr. Wilson, we receive applications from families who've supported Fairmont for generations, families who understand our traditions, our expectations, our social circles. I just don't see how your daughter would fit in. The clock in the corner ticked louder than ever. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then Madison spoke, her voice soft but clear and composed. I understand your concerns, Principal Harrison. May I ask, what exactly did my application lack? I'd like to improve for the future. There was no anger in her voice, just honest curiosity and a surprising calm that made Harrison pause. Well, he said, suddenly shifting in his seat, it's not one specific thing. We look for a certain breadth, international experiences, leadership roles, cultural exposure, family connections to our alumni. Those are the traits that uphold the Fairmont legacy. Madison nodded thoughtfully, meeting his gaze without hesitation. And you've decided I don't meet that standard, because of my father's job. The principal's smile tightened like a noose. My decision is based on a comprehensive review. We believe you would be better suited to an environment aligned with your background. He stood, abruptly offering a handshake to Mr. Wilson, the universal signal that the meeting was over. Perhaps the public school in your district would be a better fit. Mrs. Martin will show you out. As they walked to the door, Harrison overheard Howard lean toward his daughter and whisper, "Don't worry, honey. Once your mom's back tomorrow, we'll figure something out." Harrison scoffed under his breath as the door closed. What could a farmer's wife possibly do? Storm into his office in overalls? Bring a basket of homemade jam to bargain with? The thought made him chuckle as he returned to organizing his desk. Whatever was coming, he thought, wouldn't be worth his time. He was wrong. Out in the parking lot, Howard held open the door of their dusty Ford pickup, a truck that looked wildly out of place next to Fairmont's sea of Teslas and polished European SUVs. The late morning sun cast a golden glare over the school buildings behind them, making the rejection sting just a bit more. "I'm sorry, Maddie Flower," Howard said softly as he started the truck. Madison buckled her seatbelt and gently placed her portfolio, filled with perfect grades, glowing recommendations, and state-level science awards, on her lap. She ran her fingers over the frayed edge of the folder, worn down from years of ambition and hope. "It's not your fault, Dad," she said, voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "And it's not mine either. Some people just can't see beyond where we come from." As the truck rumbled to life, Howard looked at her, part pride, part heartbreak. She was only 16, but already stronger and wiser than most adults he knew. "Your mother was right," he said, a small smile forming. "We should have waited for her. She would have rattled that man's world." Madison let out a soft laugh, finally exhaling some of the tension. "Like when she dealt with that bank manager who wouldn't approve our loan?" "Oh yeah," Howard grinned as they rolled off campus. By the time she was done, he was offering us better terms than we asked for. As the school disappeared in the rearview mirror, Madison watched it grow smaller, not just in size, but in importance. They had no idea who they'd just turned away, and they were about to find out. Madison stared out the window as the truck rumbled down the winding country roads. Her voice was quiet, almost distant. "I really thought my grades and projects would be enough," she admitted. "I thought maybe they'd see past the whole farmer's daughter thing." Howard's hands gripped the wheel a little tighter. "People like Harrison don't want to see past their assumptions," he replied. "Putting people into neat little boxes makes their world easier to control." They drove in silence for a while, suburbia giving way to open fields, golden corn on one side, rows of soybeans on the other. Barns, tractors, and wide skies replaced luxury cars and manicured hedges. As they turned onto the gravel driveway leading home, Madison finally asked, What do you think Mom's gonna say? Howard gave a half smile. Oh, you know your mother. She'll have a few words for Principal Harrison, but more importantly, she'll have a plan. She always does. Their house came into view. A stunning two-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch, elegant century-old details, and a backdrop of sleek, modern agricultural buildings that told a very different story than the stereotypes Harrison clung to. Howard glanced at his phone, his expression shifting. Looks like her flight got moved up. She's landing tonight instead of tomorrow morning. Madison lit up. Really? I've missed her. 3 weeks is too long, even if it's for the foundation. Yeah, Howard nodded, grabbing her portfolio from the back seat. She's missed you too. She asked about the interview twice on the phone yesterday. Inside, their home was anything but the simple farmer's house people might imagine. Clean lines met rustic charm, antique furniture paired with contemporary design. Bookshelves lined the walls, quantum physics, classical literature, advanced agriculture. And above the fireplace, framed photographs and articles featuring Madison's mom, shaking hands with world leaders and hospital directors across the globe. As Howard headed to the kitchen, sleeves rolled, he called out, "Lunch before homework! I think we could both use some comfort food after that meeting." But Madison had stopped in her tracks, staring at a new photo on the wall. Her mother, standing tall and confident beside diplomats outside a hospital in Southeast Asia. She looked like a force of nature. Nothing like what Harrison imagined when he dismissed a farmer's wife. "Dad," Madison said, her voice now different. Steady, certain. "I think I need to call Mom before she boards." Howard turned from the sandwich counter. "Everything okay?" She smiled, calm, collected, and carrying something electric beneath her words. "Yeah, I just need to talk to her about something important." If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit subscribe. We've got a twist coming that you won't want to miss. Back at Fairmont Academy, Principal Harrison was back to doing what he did best, shaking hands with legacies. This time, it was the Scotts. Their son? Mediocre grades, a few disciplinary incidents, but none of that mattered. Their family had donated millions for the school's new performing arts center. "We're honored to welcome another generation of Scotts," Harrison said, beaming as he shook the father's hand. "Enrollment papers are already being prepared." The second the Scotts left, his assistant Carol stepped in, looking rattled. "Sir, I've just received a rather strange call." "About what?" Harrison muttered, already half distracted. "The Wilson application you rejected this morning," she said. "Apparently someone from the Wilson family has submitted a request to land a helicopter on campus grounds tomorrow morning." Harrison burst out laughing. "A helicopter? From them? What is it? A crop duster trying to scare us into changing our minds?" Carol hesitated. "The request wasn't made by Mr. Wilson. It came directly from the FAA." Harrison's laughter stopped. "And it's not for a small aircraft," she continued. "It's executive transport. They've already received clearance for a temporary landing on the East Field." "That's absurd. Who approved that?" Harrison snapped. "The governor's office, sir," Carol replied, her voice low. "And there's more. The helicopter—" Principal Harrison froze. The color drained from his face. "Wilson Veterinary Innovations. Are you absolutely certain?" he asked, barely able to speak. Carol nodded. "I double-checked, sir. The helicopter is registered to Wilson Veterinary Innovations. It's scheduled to land at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow, and we've been strongly encouraged to accommodate the request." Harrison shook his head in disbelief. "That's not possible," he whispered, as if trying to reason with the universe. "Howard Wilson is a farmer. I saw his hands." "His boots!" His voice trailed off as he frantically pulled up a search engine on his desktop, fingers clattering across the keyboard. He typed in, "Wilson Veterinary Innovations." Enter. The results hit him like a punch to the chest. Global leader in animal therapy systems and veterinary technology, founded by Dr. Victoria Wilson, Nobel Prize-winning surgeon. Market valuation, $2.8 billion. And there, at the top of the screen, was a photo of a poised, powerful woman in her early 40s, standing at a podium before a sea of global leaders. The caption read, Dr. Victoria Wilson, CEO of Wilson Veterinary Innovations and founder of the Wilson Animal Therapy Foundation. Principal Harrison leaned back slowly in his chair, his mouth dry, eyes locked on the screen. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. Wilson. Victoria Wilson, the farmer's wife, the brilliant daughter, the woman he assumed might show up in overalls to plead for a scholarship, was one of the most respected innovators in the medical world. Mrs. Martin, he croaked. Bring me everything we have on Madison Wilson's application and check for any official connection to Victoria Wilson, immediately. His assistant hurried out. Harrison loosened his tie, suddenly aware of how hot the room had become. In 2 decades of academic administration, he'd made plenty of calls about applicants. But something told him this one might be the biggest mistake of his career. And tomorrow morning at precisely 9:30, that mistake would be landing on his lacrosse field. Meanwhile, back at the Wilson home, Madison sat cross-legged on her bed. Her 3-legged border collie, Rocky, lay curled beside her, the same dog she'd rescued from a drainage ditch 2 years ago. She absent-mindedly flipped through her biology notes, though her thoughts kept drifting back to the cold sting of that interview. A soft knock pulled her from the fog. Her father stood in the doorway, holding the phone with a raised brow. Your mom wants to talk. She sounds focused. Madison took the phone, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart, came the calm, firm voice of Dr. Victoria Wilson. I just got your father's message. Tell me everything. Madison recounted the morning in detail, keeping her tone even despite the memory still sitting raw in her chest. When she finished, there was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Victoria said, I see. That was all. But Madison knew what it meant. She could already picture the look on her mother's face, that quiet intensity she always got when something needed to be set right. It's okay, Mom, Madison said quickly. There are other schools. I don't need Fairmont. This isn't about Fairmont, Victoria cut in, calm but unwavering. It's about the principle. Academic institutions have a duty to recognize excellence, regardless of background. The fact that Harrison couldn't see past his assumptions speaks more about him than it ever will about you. She paused, then continued in that measured, surgical tone she used before every operation. I've already spoken with Maxwell Murray, Fairmont's board chair. He's an old colleague from the hospital funding project. Let's just say he was surprised to hear how the interview went. Madison narrowed her eyes. Mom, what are you planning? Nothing dramatic, Victoria replied, her voice laced with just enough mischief to suggest otherwise. I'm simply rescheduling my return. I'll be making a brief stop at Fairmont Academy before I come home. The Foundation's helicopter was already booked for airport transport. We're just adjusting the landing coordinates. Madison sat upright. You're not seriously going to land a helicopter at Fairmont. Actually, sweet pea, I absolutely am. Her mother's voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It was calm, confident, the way it always was before making someone regret underestimating her. Sometimes, she said, people like Robert Harrison need a visual demonstration of just how wrong they are. And after 3 weeks of polite diplomacy with government officials, I could use a little direct confrontation. Howard, who had been standing silently in the doorway, stepped into the room and sat beside Madison. He gently switched the phone to speaker. Victoria, he said carefully, maybe we should handle this more traditionally. Traditional approaches don't break systemic bias, Howard, she replied. You, of all people, know that. How many times did you attend conferences where your ideas were ignored until the results were undeniable, all because you were just a farmer? Howard's stern face softened. Fair point. And I'm not doing this just for Madison, Victoria continued, though that would be reason enough. I'm doing it for every student who's ever been judged by a zip code instead of their potential. The Wilson Foundation has supported rural education for years, and it's time people like Harrison see the power behind the names they overlook. What happens when a $2.8 billion legacy lands on the front lawn of an elite prep school? Stick around. Tomorrow at 9:30 a.m., everything changes. Subscribe if you believe every student deserves a shot, not just the privileged ones. Madison gently ran her fingers through Rocky's fur, her voice thoughtful. But Mom, even if she proves her point to Principal Harrison, it won't change the system. Not really. On the other end of the phone, Victoria Wilson's voice was cool, calm, and calculated. That depends entirely on the terms I established during the conversation, she replied. And tomorrow I intend to be very specific. She paused. I need to make a few more calls before my flight. I love you both. Howard, make sure Madison's transcript is ready and bring her portfolio, especially the research on animal-assisted trauma therapy. As the call ended, Madison stared at the phone in awe. Is she serious? Howard chuckled. When has your mother ever not been serious? Then he added with a nostalgic grin. Remember when she rerouted 3 emergency helicopters to that rural hospital after they refused to treat your grandmother because she wasn't in network? The hospital administrator almost passed out when the head of the state medical board stepped out of that chopper. Madison laughed softly. Yeah, that sounds like Mom. Howard stood and patted her shoulder. She's been fighting these fights her whole life. The helicopter just makes the entrance a little harder to ignore. He turned at the door. Get some rest, Maddie. Tomorrow's going to be unforgettable. After he left, Madison laid back beside Rocky. What do you think, boy? Is Mom right to make such a scene? The dog licked her cheek and gazed up at her with those wise, steady eyes, the kind that don't doubt the people they trust. She sighed, cracking open her biology book again. Whatever happens tomorrow, Principal Robert Harrison is about to get an education of his own, dawn at Fairmont Academy. But this time something was different. Since 5 a.m., crews had been buzzing across campus. The east field, normally used by the lacrosse team, had been cleared, orange cones marking a temporary landing zone. Security had doubled. The usual air of calm entitlement was replaced by something else, tension. Principal Harrison had barely slept. All night, he'd scrolled through article after article about Dr. Victoria Wilson, founder, surgeon, innovator, and Madison's mother. The realization had hit him like a freight train. The farmer's wife he dismissed so casually was a global force. By 8:15 a.m., he stood in his mirror, straightening his 4th tie. Charcoal wool suit, Harvard alumni stripes, polished Oxfords, dressed like a man who still hoped appearances could fix mistakes. But the dark circles under his eyes told the truth. His wife, Evelyn, appeared in the doorway with a mug of coffee. You look like you're headed to a firing squad, not a parent meeting. This isn't just any parent, he replied, voice tight. Victoria Wilson sits on science boards with cabinet members. She turned down a seat on the president's council because she was too busy. And yesterday, I denied her daughter admission based on assumptions, Evelyn finished softly. You've always been quick to judge, Robert. It's part of the job. But this one? You misread the whole picture. He checked his watch again. Half the board's already called. Turns out the Wilson Foundation funds research at most of their companies and partner universities. Chairman Murray basically ordered me to fix it, or step down. Evelyn took a calm sip. Then fix it. Own the mistake. Offer the girl a place. It's not that simple. Sure it is, she replied. You assumed you knew who she was. Now you know better. Do better, because right now, she's not just a billionaire. She's a mother. At 8:30, Harrison grabbed his briefcase and left, heart pounding. As he reached his car, his phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. Media vans outside main gate. Education Today reporter requesting comment. He groaned. Of course. A billionaire CEO landing a helicopter on a prep school lawn? Clickbait gold. By 9:15, a quiet crowd had gathered around the field. Teachers whispered. Students crowded classroom windows with phones aimed at the sky. No one knew exactly what was coming, but they all felt the tremor in the air. Principal Harrison stood on the east field beside board chairman Maxwell Murray, a retired federal judge and longtime ally of Victoria's. I've known her for years, Murray murmured. She transformed animal care in disaster zones, launched therapy programs across 6 continents. You made a mistake, Robert, but it's not too late, if you own it. Harrison nodded stiffly, eyes fixed on the horizon. And then they heard it. The thunder of rotors, growing louder, closer. The sky above Fairmont began to tremble. Want to see what happens next when power meets pride and one mother changes everything? Don't miss the next episode. Hit subscribe now because this is only the beginning. Principal Harrison stood frozen, faced with a truth he couldn't ignore. The girl he'd dismissed because her father was a farmer? Her mother had revolutionized PTSD treatment for veterans. Chairman Murray didn't hold back. You rejected Madison Wilson based on your assumptions. You didn't even read the full application. Her mother's letter was in there. You saw Sullivan Farm and decided she didn't belong. But that farm was actually a leading research facility where Wilson Veterinary Innovations tested breakthrough therapies. Harrison had made a critical error, one that now echoed through every corner of the campus. And then, the sound of rotors. Silence fell as a sleek black helicopter descended onto the school field. The logo of Wilson Veterinary Innovations gleamed under the morning sun. Out stepped Victoria Wilson, Nobel Prize-winning doctor, global leader, and Madison's mother, alongside a composed Madison and a transformed Howard Wilson in a tailored suit. Every detail sent a message. You misjudged us. Victoria greeted Chairman Murray warmly. To Harrison, she offered only a direct look and a firm handshake. We have much to discuss regarding my daughter's application, she said, her voice calm but unmistakably in control. As they toured the campus, Victoria's tone remained polite, but laced with purpose. My husband comes from 5 generations of farmers, she noted, but his work has redefined animal care and sustainability. Then, stopping in the courtyard, she turned to Principal Harrison. My daughter ranks in the top 0.1% nationwide, speaks 3 languages, and developed a therapy protocol used in veterans' hospitals. And yet, you found that lacking? Students had gathered, phones out, ears open. Harrison began to apologize, but Victoria cut in. You shouldn't have needed to know who we are. Her accomplishments should have spoken for themselves. Instead, you saw a farmer's daughter asking for financial aid and made your judgment. Chairman Murray tried to diffuse the tension, but Victoria had come prepared. She presented a proposal, a new endowment funded by the Wilson Foundation to support rural students with high potential. Conditions included blind application reviews and implicit bias training for admissions staff. And Madison? She would serve as a student consultant on the committee, if she agreed. Madison stood tall. I'll do it on one condition. The committee must actively visit rural schools. Talent won't apply here if they've never been told they belong. The crowd murmured in support. Harrison conceded. We'll begin outreach immediately. 6 months later, the changes were undeniable. Applications from rural students rose by 38%, and diversity across the school improved dramatically. Programs launched under Madison's guidance reshaped Fairmont's future, including a fully approved animal therapy center. Years passed. Madison became a national leader in education reform. The girl once rejected was now shaping policies at the federal level. Her work, born of rejection, was opening doors across the country and beyond. And one day, as she stood beneath the sign now reading Fairmont Wilson Academy, she smiled. Rejection hadn't broken her. It had redirected her. And that helicopter? It didn't just land on a lacrosse field. It landed a message that would change education forever.